We will talk about
que nos va a exponer Francisco Jurado, perdón, de la Universidad Politécnica.
we will now listen to the Experiencias of Spain, and the conference will be given by Francisco Jurado. Then we will talk about a Mexican and Italian partnership between the University of Firenze and UNAM. Then we will talk about an experience between Hungary and Mexico.
Totalmente auspiciado por, este proyecto va a seguir en los siguientes años.
This is a project that will continue in the future, and we'll hear the details later. Francisco Jurado is an expert in structures, and he is a professor at the Politécnica University of Madrid. He has given postgraduate courses about cultural heritage recovery and structural courses. He has participated in the recovery of more than 100 buildings, including the Church of St. Jerome, as well as the Mosque of the Christ of the Light in Toledo. He was the lead. He was the lead restorer in a project in 2011 following an earthquake that hit Toledo. And he currently works in Santiago de Compostela, as well as in the Infant's Palace of Guadalajara. And I will now give the floor to Francisco Jurado. Thank you very much for inviting me again, in spite of my strong opinions. And today we are going to talk about a lot of things that repeat themselves. And here we have a lot of words that start with RE. So we have a rebuild, repair, and reinforce. I will explain their importance later on. Last year I told you about the reconstruction of this tower in the castle of La Lorca, and I explained how it was built. This in fact was last year's presentation. And the first structure is very similar to the recovered building. Here what we saw was that the top was lost. And with an aftershock, this is what remained. The tower was left this way because some of the parts that were glued together with mortar were the ones that crumbled down. This is a tower that goes back to the 13th century. And it's impressive to see how a building that had lasted for so many centuries came down with an earthquake. And here we see that most of the damage was done to one of the corners. So the intervention proposal was to glue it back together, not only for economic and sustainability reasons, but also because we didn't want to bring down more than what had been damaged by the earthquake. Here we see that this corner had this 20 centimeter displacement. Here we see the cracks from inside and outside. And of course the crack went through the most vulnerable and weakest spots of the building, which include the staircase as well as the windows and the doors. Here we see that the corner rib was displaced, it broke.
Y bueno, y como la cubierta, que era una cubierta impropia, digamos, hecha lo que llaman en España la catalana, ¿no?
And
Pues,
the top side, which was known as la catalana,
que tenían arriba para asomarse por encima
came
todo
down.
se hizo con sumo cuidado, pero no se podía.
The removal of the top side was done in a very careful way, and we had to take everything from the top because we could not only brace the building, we had to remove the top side and then put the rest of the structure back together. And the damage was so severe that what used to be a wall that was 1 meter thick ended up being a wall with 80 centimeters in thickness. It was still strong enough, thanks to the fact that it was made of brick. And the only thing we had to do with these brick structures was to brace them to prevent the bricks from falling down. Here we see the area where there was greater displacement. Here we see how lime mortar was used. Here we see also how the crack went through the wall. And thinking about how to tackle this problem was completely overwhelming. Because on the one hand it was a very dangerous building, but it was not a matter of letting go to the fear. Here we used polypropylene on the top side. And here we see the ribs showing after the top side that has been removed. Here we see the use of compatible or similar materials, and then the question was how to intervene a place that had shaken so much. This is an example of displacement. This is another example of displacement. Here the displacement is equal to 60 centimeters. So first we had to define if the structure was stable enough, and we made a visual analysis to see what the load was in this specific rib. It is not very clear here, but this stone could bear weight of up to 17 kilograms. So here we have the load bearing capacity is 17 kilograms per square centimeter. So what we did to get back the geometrical shape was to insert wooden wedges and this was a solution that was also used during the Middle Ages to leave or to keep the shape of the arches and the ribs. And what we would do was to put inside as many wooden wedges as possible, because wood is a flexible material, and this was a round arch that we could use wedges on. So once we put the wedges, we had to brace the arch on the outside. For example, in this case we could not use wedges because they didn't fit in. There was only a gap of 1 millimeter, so we could not put a wooden wedge here. Here we also see how we place the brace on the inside of the vault. And this is only a local support preventing bricks from falling. Here what we have inside was to measure the height and see if the shape of the vault had been modified. These are more pictures of our intervention.
a la catalana, sino que lo macizamos como la torre alfonsina.
And what we did was to put a milder solution, and we avoided putting the original solution in order to remove some of the weight that the original tower had before the
Tuvimos
earthquake.
gran polémica con las almenas, cosa que creo que no conté, bueno, tampoco viene al caso.
There was a lot of controversy around what we did with the battlements.
Que tenían un corazón con la...
The original battlements had
las almenas y le valdría el escudo, pero no les
a coat of arms that with the typical heart-shaped coat of the medieval family that had built it, but we had to eliminate the battlements.
Bueno, entonces esto es para comentar un poco que en la misma línea que parece que estáis planteando las intervenciones aquí, que es se cae algo, lo restituyo.
So, following on what you have said, which is intervening something to restore it to its original shape, what we had to do was something different. And for example, in this case, we didn't replace the battlements because the battlements were not in the original tower. We also had to ask us if we wanted to use the same type of a stone. And what we had to do was to add some glass fiber to give some reinforcement to the weakest wall on one of the sides. This was an emergency intervention, meaning that we didn't charge for a lot of the work that we had to do. And this was a construction project that cost 1 million euros. It was built by a company called Siena, and it was not much money for this company because they were normally working on bigger projects such as 300 million euro airports. So this was really a minor task. In 2016, in Mérida, this tower, in February 2016, look closely. When the bird leaves, it's a sign that the rest of the tower is crumbling. The cameraman is more afraid than the person with the cell phones. So the birds are leaving, and then the belfry crumbles.
Claro, documentos como estos son difíciles de tener normalmente.
Video evidence like this is very difficult to get. In this case, it was because the death of this tower had been previously announced, and it's because of this. Here there were records that showed that this tower was so weak due to water infiltration. However, people had not realized that the structure was already weak. And when the bishop asked for a structural analysis of the building, an architect came and just said, well, everything looks fine, and that's it. However, afterwards, it showed that the architect had not done the job right. So there was water infiltration here where we have the green line, and this weakened this part of the structure. At the top, there was also reinforced concrete. And I am putting these lines so that you see what are the weak spots that move before the belfry crumbles down. And fortunately, the tower just crashed against the balconies of the neighboring houses. It didn't cause any additional damage. So this is a blueprint
zona muy debilitada.
That shows how the weak spot of this tower
masa llegaba a producir esa especie de empuje de la parte de piedra externa
was straining the outer stonework
por la falta de resistencia de ese material.
due to the lack of resistance of this material. So, afterwards, there was a call for proposals to recover this belfry, and what I realized was that I wanted to participate, but they wouldn't have accepted a Catalan in this project, so I had to apply undercover. So this is the picture of how it was in 2008, and as you see, there are neighboring structures. And when one of my colleagues visited this site, he realized that there were cracks. Well, when the belfry collapsed, this is the way it looked like. And what did they do? They brought in a backhoe to remove all the debris, and a lot of people came in to take some stones as a souvenir. And what my colleague proposed was that we should use a very thick concrete slab to create another tower. We could have three possible solutions. The intermediate solution was concrete, and another one was cement. So, as you may guess, I won this competition. But do you know who was in charge of the work? It was the same architect that didn't analyze the belfry correctly. And the thing was that the bishop trusted the architect more than he trusted me. And I don't think it was a problem with racism. However, this bishop was not very happy with having a Catalan fix up his belfry. We also had the participation of the government, so the government saw that the whole process was transparent. But well, my proposal was to avoid doing what had been done in the 1960s. What they would do was to bring down the domes if they had already been damaged. My proposal was different. What I thought was that we should recover what was left. The thing is that this is just like shooting yourself in the foot. But the point is that what I proposed was the following. I recommended that we put this in this way. Fortunately, the bottom of the tower was intact. And well, this is a recovery project that did not have a very big budget. But if we wanted to restore it to its original appearance, then that will be someone else's business. This is another case study. I want to mention it because of the way we intervene. This is the temple of Our Lady of Lorca. And here we see the fragility of the building. Here we have a brick-made drum. And what happened was this. There is a video also of how this crumbled. It was shown on national TV, and this is what remained. The whole tower, or everything else that was strong, remained standing, but the dome was completely collapsed. We also did some emergency intervention, given that it was an emergency, we didn't necessarily have to recover it as it was. But, well, here is an image of the original convent. There are pictures of how the tower used to be. And this is a 19th century pastiche from an architect that had to just copy and paste designs here and there. So my recommendation to the Ministry of Culture was an impromptu solution, because there were no formal proposals. And so what I recommended was that we put it back to its original shape, but not necessarily with the same materials, because if you have a reinforced concrete as well as brick, it could eventually fall again. So here we installed a very elastic structure made with stainless steel. It was empty on the inside, and we put this structure especially in the areas that had been lost, as well as in the ones that were weakened with lichen and mold. So here we also installed a metallic structure. And we also had to put something to avoid rays from hitting the building, because this is a structure that, if it's made out of metal, at the top it can certainly attract lightning. We had to cover it as well, because it was also really prone to damage due to weathering. This is the dome. This is an image of the dome as we lift it up. And we had to put together all the bricks, and we had to put them together with glass fiber. And we had to make it evident that the whole building was already really stable. And we put a staircase. This is a staircase that would then be attached to the top, but it is not touching the ground. We had to add an additional step. The purpose of this staircase is for everything to hang from the top and to make this addition reversible. And of course, everyone was extremely critical of this decision. There were even some journalists that said that I was doing a very poor job on this, and the bishop said, well, it doesn't matter if anyway we'll remove it. All of this goes back to the 20th century, and all these 20th century materials had to be replaced with the stainless steel solutions. Back then, I didn't have enough time to justify my decision and my intervention, because this was an emergency commission from the Ministry of Culture. And at some point there was public consultation about whether people wanted to change it or not. But right now people are at peace with the fact that this tower is different from the original, but it still keeps its original appearance from afar. So these are examples of a reconstruction. Sorry for rushing, but
esto es una iglesia en Canet los Roches. Esto sale en una película que se llama El Olivo.
This is an image of a movie called El Olivo. This is a picture from 2001. This is the profile of the town. This is a town that has a very small population, but it does have a Gothic cathedral that has a transept at the back. And here what's characteristic is that the walls are very thin and mostly made of brick and clay. a tree had grown right next to the drum, and it deteriorated the wooden base of the top side. Here we see an arch that is completely cracked. I was really surprised about the fact that the arch had cracked in this way, and when we started bringing this down, it turns out that I eventually decided, or I thought that maybe we could leave this as a sort of a window, because if the arch was not really serving its purpose, and maybe we could leave this open, but people would have killed me if I did that. So what we did was to brace the building and then repair from the braces up. We decided to leave the original roof. The original roof was undulated. And the top side was okay. And we tried to apply some lime to this, but it didn't work. Water was still filtrating inside. And we decided to put a regular mortar coating as well as bricks. This is the dome. And we flatten it on the outside. This is an example of how the whole looks inside. Here is an example so that you see how this wavy structure is very stable, but the problem is that it cracked because there was no way the water could come out of it. And here we see the centering, and we see how we were using a brick, and we used gypsum. We used the gypsum at the top as well as brick, and the way we finished the sides was like this. We used the bricks in this way to provide the support to the external cover. So I have 5 minutes? Really? Only 5 minutes? My God. So I will not add anything. Here we have the Arco de la Frontera construction. This was a replica of the palace of Charles V in Granada, and here we see people that had no experience whatsoever in vaults, creating a 14-meter wide vault with 7 meters in height, just with mortar and brick. So this is the way it looks right now. I want to use this blueprint to show you how graphic calculations show how the vault was created, and here we realized that if you add the ribs, then you can remove some of the load that is at the top. And I agree with Santiago Huerta that it makes a lot more sense to calculate the load graphically. Here, for example, is an exercise that I give to my students so that they calculate the load-bearing capacity of these flying buttresses, and they have to calculate the resistance of the structure according to the type of materials. And I also wanted to show you a couple of very easy to use software solutions so that you know what you can do with different types of arches. You can also calculate the load in more complex structures. For example, here we have the arches
Santiago, precisamente,
of the Cathedral of Santiago.
en la que podría también, si tenemos cuenta, pues mover, veis cómo cambia la resultante sobre el suelo.
And here you may see how the result of
Si encontramos
the load-bearing capacity changes with respect to the floor.
otra historia de presiones, en este caso.
This software is also very useful to analyze if the different forces are in equilibrium. And this will physically translate into the stability of the building. And I will try to cover as much material as possible in the 5 minutes that I have left.
Bueno, antes del año pasado cuando vine,
When I was here last year,
pues llevaba 20 años apeada a una iglesia en Santo Domingo, Santa Bárbara.
I had been working for 20 years in a church in Santo Domingo and in Santa Barbara that had braces inside and outside because allegedly they were necessary due to the ground stability. So what we did was to calculate the forces again, and we calculated the forces that were on the top of the sacristy. And the compression capacity of the structure was so small that if we made any small modification to the arches, there would be a lot of stress on many parts of the construction. Here, what similarities are there between these two pictures? You will tell me. And if we apply dynamic calculations, then we see that the structure will be under a lot of stress. For example, in this case of this building, we see that if there is any stress, then there will be cracks, and in fact there were 4 centimeter cracks. In this case, we have a church in Toledo, the roof lantern of which was leaned. This is how it looks inside, and so we asked, what should we do? So what I wanted to do was to put only some support on the side that the tower was leaning to, and I made my calculations. I saw what weight the dome was carrying. Here we see how much load the construction is carrying with the roof lantern leaned to the side. And it's important to notice that the deformation shown by the software is the deformation that results from the original construction according to the parameters that we had put in. And so what I tried to do with this was to see if the solution was stable enough and if it could withstand a certain level of rigidity. Here we have a reinforced concrete brace. This is prior to us installing the original cover.
Bueno, ya esta era muy divertida. En conceptos de restauración de ruinas.
This was a very fun experience. Speaking of ruins, this structure had completely crumbled down, and the proposal was to reuse the materials that were still left on the ground. And here we have some white concrete stairs, and I am mentioning these concrete stairs because sometimes we think that concrete is bad and sometimes we think that it's good. I don't think it's neither good or bad, it just depends on its application. And I put this stairs, and a lot of people immediately jumped on what was left of their castle, and they loved it. They even submitted this picture for a competition.
Y ahora voy a poner una en la que, según he oído a Leandro, lo mismo me meten en la cárcel, claro.
Now I will tell you about a case that I could have been sent to jail for, but this was a church that had been abandoned in 1940, and since then there was this hole in the roof, and the rain had poured for many years inside. So this is how it was. The vaults were completely broken, the dome was about to collapse, and I said that, well, it looks really nice. I really like that you go inside the church and you can see the dome. I really liked the beauty of this building. And I have 2 minutes, right? So here we are working on stabilizing the structure, and we decided to install a glass cover. So the glass lets light in, and we placed what was left from the ribs in this vault. And on top of the sacristy, we recommended that we had this solution. And right now this building is a museum. Here we had a very big hole in the roof, and we decided to install an elevator. And we calculated with a computer what pieces we would need to close this hole in the roof, and this very appealing elevator was installed, and after 4 years of doing this, I have not been thrown into jail, and people actually like it. So I want to finish my intervention with a reflection. Like I said, we needed to reconstruct, repair, and rebuild. So I can show you some pictures of a repair, which is how the building now looks from inside, and well, there are still some archaeological remains, but it's very difficult to describe in 1 minute an archaeological site that you have studied for years. In terms of reconstruction, I am not much of a fan of modifying its original shape. Now repairing, I think repairing tends to safety structures. And now about reinforcing. I published an article in 2004 about the repairs that were made after the 1985 earthquake, and many of these used reinforced concrete to increase the building's stability. However, we currently think that concrete is like a disease. So what I think is the following. Concrete has a resistance of 0.25 kilonewtons per square centimeter. Carbon fiber is 4 times as resistant as steel, and brick and mortar has a very low resistance. And for example, if I had hurt my head and I was to choose between a bandage made of steel and one made of fabric, then it wouldn't really matter if I used fabric, because I don't necessarily need something that is really strong. So what I mean with this is that sometimes discriminating a material due to its resistance is not necessarily the best option. And if what we want to do is something like this, we could certainly use polypropylene, but this is just my opinion. And I even learned the word in Italian, which is cerotti. I really wanted to apply this concept in my discussion. Just to finish, Santiago mentioned that in Santiago de Compostela we are not using concrete anymore. In fact, I am in charge of one of these works. I am replacing a reinforced concrete solution from the 1970s that is not working, even though they thought back then that this solution would provide additional stability to a building. This is still a very private project. I cannot give you a lot of details about it, but I am really glad that I could at least mention it to you as a brief example. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Francisco Jurado. We have a time for 2 questions.
Bien, todo esto que nos ha presentado, bueno, pues veo que hay similitudes en situaciones que se han presentado en los
From your presentation, I see that there are similarities between your work and our interventions in the buildings that were struck by the 2017 earthquakes. I really like the comparison between materials, but I would like to know if you know if they have worked well with brick and mortar installations. What has happened in my experience is that sometimes we have used cement, but sulfates as well as humidity are degrading the stone. So when people tell me that we are going to inject cement, I am a little bit wary, because I could just add a filler that lasts for 50 or 70 years. But using cement is not necessarily the best solution.
No. Yo lo que pregunto es que el empleo de estos materiales que al final ha presentado, si tiene usted evidencias de cómo se han comportado las estructuras,
how the structures have interacted with the materials that you presented in the last part of your presentation, or have there been anomalous reactions to these materials? Well, cement was the solution everyone would use back in the 70s. And we thought that it was an eternal material, but it is not as long-lasting as we originally thought. And in fact, these materials depend, or the resistance depends also on the loads that they are bearing. With regards to cement, the thing is that you cannot remove it easily. You literally leave a solution that is set in stone. And if you put it on top of the brick, then you screw the brick, because you cannot use a brick and mortar solution. On my website, if you look for Francisco Jurado, I have an article about why cement is not necessarily the best solution. In fact, we are not using cement anymore in Spain. We use lime. We use different sorts of lime. And if necessary, we use a type of white concrete. But lime has also been used in very poor ways sometimes. There was one time when I had a stock of lime that had resin as well as salts, and these also were degrading the materials as well. And that's when we decided to turn for natural lime.
Inyecciones de cal sí que he hecho mucho.
So I have certainly used the lime as a filler, and I have discussed in depth whether lime is good with a colleague called Rebecca Funtis, and overall I believe that lime is a very good solution. It is better than using other materials that are not good at all. And like I mentioned last year,
verdaderamente ruina almohade de una muralla de tapial restaurada con inyecciones de cal.
And I have a lot of evidence about buildings where we have injected airlime coatings or other forms of lime coatings. But going back to your question, you were asking about these materials and if I have evidence of their usefulness, and I do have evidence of the usefulness of carbon fiber. And we were using this solution as well as some bearings in that project that I was working on, but I didn't really know why people decided to install this, and they would say that carbon fiber is top of the line technology. I don't think it is top of the line technology. So I think that the best materials are the materials that we can use as laminates, and if you can prove that there is compatibility between the materials, because if you needed to use an additional structure to keep the materials together, then there is no material compatibility and it doesn't make sense to use them. So if we have a solution such as this one, are we really improving safety? Not necessarily. And sometimes when we want to force some materials to be together, we will have to put some braces or some additional support structures on the inside of the building, and they will show. So, for example, if we think of a car and I have an accident, and the car is completely damaged on the front because I had a frontal crash, then what I need is the car to be the way it was before, and I don't need a car that on the front has additional support that are keeping the pieces together. So what architects and engineers need to understand is that we don't build thinking about the next earthquake. Of course, the structure needs to be stable, but we don't really know what is going to happen. So we need to repair the building, but we should not reinforce it. And that's why I'm so much against the abuse of braces, because if a brace breaks, then there will be additional consequences. I had a friend that had put a lot of braces on a building because of a superstition, and they decided on the number of braces for superstitious reasons. So there is no evidence about how these braces, as well as these flattening solutions with mortar work. And I believe that there will be cases when we might use reinforced concrete, for example, and it will work, and maybe it will not work. Things are likely to change in the future. Definitely, all the new materials are something that we continue to discuss to a great extent. Thank you very much for your conference, and a round of applause to Dr. Francisco Jurado.
La siguiente ponencia.
The next talk is Experiences in the Survey of the Old Convents and Guillermo in Totolapan with laser scanner. It is a collaboration between the University of Firenze and UNAM. Stefano Bertocci is an architect and scholar from the Division of Architecture in that university. Since 2010, he has been heading the Landscape University Lab. He coordinates research in digital topography for architecture archaeology and
También ha realizado numerosos estudios
cultural
relacionados
heritage,
con
and he has
sitios de
conducted
patrimonio
several
de la UNESCO
studies
y es responsable del
for
Departamento de
UNESCO
Grado de
heritage
Estudios
sites, and
Internacionales de
he's part of
Cooperación
international
en
cooperation
Investigación
agreements
con
and
otras
research
universidades.
together with other
Matteo
universities.
Bigongiari, de también
Matteo
esta institución, es
Bigongiari
arquitecto y
from
director en
this
arquitectura por la
university is
Universidad
an architect
Università di
and
Firenze,
director by the
con
Firenze
un estudio sobre
University.
las fortificaciones
He
de Leonardo da
studies
Vinci en
Leonardo
Giobbino.
da Vinci's
Ha participado en
Giobbino
investigaciones tanto a
works.
nivel nacional
He
como
has been part of
internacional y es
national and
autor de
international
numerosas
research, and
publicaciones sobre el
he has
tema de
published
topografía
several
digital y su uso con fines de
articles
conservación y
on
documentación del patrimonio.
photography and the preservation of heritage. With us is also Reynaldo Esperanza Castro. He's a university architect from the UNAM.
Profesor de carrera de
He
tiempo completo en la
is a
Facultad de
full
Arquitectura de la
scholar
UNAM,
in
en el área de
UNAM's
teoría,
architecture
historia e
department in
investigación.
theory, history, and research in architecture. They were all three part of this workshop where we had a collaboration from the earthquake. In this context always emerged institutional collaboration. From this collaboration, workshops and truly valuable information happen from them. Thank you, and now I give the floor to the panelists. And I'll be strict with time.
Muchas gracias, Mariana.
Well, thank you, Mariana.
Como lo acaba de mencionar Mariana,
as Mariana mentioned,
a través de un diplomado
through
en patrimonio mundial que se organiza en la Facultad
diploma on
de Arquitectura,
World
a través de la
Heritage
División de
done
Educación
by the
Continua,
Architecture
en el
Division
cual
and the Continuous
analizamos
Education
cada año
Department.
distintas
Well, year after year, we
ciudades y
analyze
sitios,
different
patrimonio
cities
mundial,
and sites
de
such
la
as, that
UNESCO.
are World Heritage,
Los
UNESCO's World
profesores
Heritage,
Bertocci,
and
si quieres.
Professor Bertocci.
El profesor Bertocci, que coordina el laboratorio
Professor Bertocci
de
coordinates the Firenze University Laboratory, and Professor Roberto Sabelli coordinates the Restoration Laboratory. They are both interested in, and were interested in collaborating after the 2017 earthquakes.
Al interés de la rectoría de la propia universidad,
included
debido a que la ciudad de Puebla
own
y la
university's
ciudad de
interest. The
tienen
city
un
of
convenio
Puebla and
político, son ciudades hermanas. Nos
Firenze,
acercamos
they
a la
have
Coordinación
an
Nacional de
agreement
Monumentos
as
para ver si
sister
podíamos
cities.
trabajar
So
con algún monumento de
we
Puebla.
added to
Sin
this
embargo,
talk to see if we were able
nos
to work on a
comentan
Puebla
que de la
monument.
ruta de los
However,
monasterios
from the
de las laderas
monastery
del volcán, los
ways
dos
from the
poblanos fueron los que menos
volcano,
daños sufrieron.
well, people
y
from
los
Puebla,
tres, perdón, de Puebla
or
fueron los
rather
que
the
menos daños
monuments in
sufrieron,
Puebla
y nos sugieren
didn't,
trabajar en
were not as
el
damaged.
convento y antiguo templo de
And we were
Totolapan.
suggested to work in the Totolapan convent.
Hubo dos etapas para hacer el levantamiento
For this
de
survey,
Totolapan. El primero
we
se
did it
trabajó
in
conjuntamente
two
con el
stages.
laboratorio de
First,
imagen
together with the
de la
image
propia
laboratory
coordinación,
of the
junto con
coordination,
el laboratorio de relieve de la
and together
Universidad
with
de
the
Florencia.
Florence University laboratory
Más adelante
working
vamos a ver
on
los detalles. Y una segunda etapa, 6 meses después,
landscape, and
en
6
donde
months afterwards,
llegan ya 6 estudiantes, 2 profesores, 6 estudiantes
2 professors and 6
de
students
Italia
came from
y 4
Italy,
estudiantes de la Facultad de
and
Arquitectura.
4 students from the architecture department.
Perdón, ahí está.
Oh, excuse me, is that better?
Más lejos.
Further away?
Disculpen.
Oh, excuse me.
Y bueno, vamos a mostrarles los resultados del proyecto.
So we'll show the
académico. Quiero
results of the
enfatizar,
academic
es un
project,
proyecto
and just
netamente
to emphasize,
académico,
this
que
is
se trata de
an
un workshop.
academic project
Y,
that
el
was
alcance
created
de
through a
ninguna manera
workshop.
nunca fue el
Its
presentar un
scope
proyecto
was
ejecutivo, ni
not
siquiera
presenting an
un
executive
proyecto,
project.
es solamente
It was
el
only
levantamiento
to
con
do a
algún,
survey
diagnóstico. El profesor
together with a
Bertocci presentará algunas
diagnosis.
experiencias internacionales y
We'll
posteriormente
hear
nos
some international
concentraremos ya
experience
en
from
el tema
Professor
global.
Bertocci, and then we'll focus on Totolapan.
Grazie, sono particolarmente felice di essere stato invitato.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Onoro un impegno
It is an honor. I'm honoring a commitment that both my colleague and I decided to pursue. My colleague is not able to be here, but I am happy to see that this work is now concluded, and it's a joy for me to introduce it to the university. Well, to introduce the university, the superintendents at a local level, and to show the outcome of an activity that took us a year and a half. This is our survey laboratory. We have heard this word a few times throughout the symposium, but survey is a fundamental activity for all critical interpretation activities in architecture on the territory, and it is an incredible instrument of all operators, architects, and urban experts. This past years, this scientific branch, well, it has been innovated due to technological breakthroughs and due to adaptations. Laser scanners are one of these adaptations, and it came from the Gulf War in the 1990s, and these were adapted to civil use. Our laboratory includes several instruments. These are basic instruments, and the activities are a topographic survey, meaning all those activities that at an international level are typically classified as remote sensio, meaning that these are survey activities without object interference. We don't need to remove objects from their location. It doesn't mean that you don't study these objects, since that is a major activity for having important results. We have been working for 20 years in our institution, and for this past decade, well, this decade we devoted to technological development and to opportunities offered by digital technologies. We heard of scanner survey, but I'd like to share some words given the time. And this is a video just for you to see the survey from 20 years ago. By means of these instruments, we have remote control, and we're able to work in our own working table. We can now create a model including all the physical characteristics and dimensions of that object. So we can now see the first phases of a monument and the first indispensable blueprints. This is now indispensable for every working activity, since we're able to see all the details, the curvatures, the volts, the measurements, the wall measurements that are changing, the floor.
Anche quando si trattano appunto dal punto di vista statico tecnologico, quindi sono informazioni che senz'altro.
And even technologically and statically speaking, these are reports. These provide us with information for the ideal project's results. Whenever I go to an institution, I tell them, well, we're in a digital era. And this is unfortunately a very odd stage, difficult to understand. We're undergoing the digital era. We are just as the first hominids that used the first systems. The digital world has much to offer to the architecture. It is about understanding the interactions that may be useful for our work. Our department and laboratory's mission is that of conducting experiments, knowing what the possibilities are, and within 5 years we may have more efficient documents and instruments. Nowadays, they're not as easy to use as our phone is, but I am sure that in the near future they will be more friendly for us to use, for us and for other professionals. And regarding opportunities, the cloud that we usually see, it may include different types of exits. In here are two that are the main use in surveys. The first fringe is the traditional exit. It's in the design you see the method. It's the one that we use to speak with businesses for a project assessment. And we go from a very rich shape 3D world to another one that's more iconic. It is iconic and ideal, though temporary. There's also another option, which is the modeling. I may use that in order to create a scale model from the cloud, and I can create a picture, which allows us to know what are the surface characteristics of the architectural model. We know the surface colors, materials. So digitally, we're given with amazing opportunities. These are some works we've done. The monastery from San Guillermo was severely damaged by an earthquake. And here are 3 examples of works done at different levels. The first, in L'Aquila, we work in a double scale. We work in the historic downtown. And all of these data is given to building companies, which can be done here in Mexico. This comes from historical evolution, Fisher's blueprint, construction characteristics, and this is one of the possibilities that the digital world is offering to us. We're able to assess surface and their curvature. This was major in analyzing the earthquake effects as well as all of those phenomena, its cracks, and the earthquake effects in historic buildings. This 3D model is an innovation that has also been done at a legislative level and was also introduced in a reconstruction project for a historic center. From the Aquila earthquake, it happened in the Aquila crater that was damaged by the earthquake.
non come elementi a sé
And we
stanti,
include
ma come
residential
parte di un organismo, di un
buildings
sistema
and
che ha
historic
loro
sites. They are not
interazioni
separate
a
buildings,
livello
but rather
strutturale.
part of a
E
single
questo è stata una
organism
acquisizione
with
importante
structural
anche a livello
dimensions.
legislativo, perché abbiamo potuto imporre con la Costituzione
At a
di questi
legislative
anni,
level,
appunto,
this has been
degli
important since we were able to
aggregati
include
di
these
progetto
projects
da sviluppare in maniera contemporanea, da realizzare in maniera contemporanea, ma anche da progettare
and we included them
in
for a
maniera
contemporary
contemporanea. Questo per
development.
realizzare, per far sì che un
It is
intervento
part of a
venga realizzato
contemporary
prima e poi in caso
project.
di sisma martella quello che è rimasto da realizzare.
We
Qui vedete il
included them so
risultato
that
finale
we
di
could
uno
have
che erano
an intervention
712.
before
Vedete,
the damages
c'è
takes
un
place.
elemento importante,
And this is one of
l'aggregato,
the
e
out of the
l'efficacia
7
dell'intervento
historic
dell'aggregato
sites.
ovviamente alle esigenze della popolazione, alle esigenze economiche e alle
This is
esigenze
the whole set
amministrative.
based on the administrative and economic demands that the population had.
L'utilizzazione, in questo caso
The next
fortuita,
example
perché,
is
abbiamo seguito i
the
lavori del Palazzo del Podestà di Mantova nella fase
use
precedente
and the works
e nella
of
fase
the
successiva al terremoto
Mantua
del 2012.
structure.
Un evento
This
che ha
was after the
mutato
2012
in corso
earthquake.
d'opera la struttura fisica del fabbricato.
The physical structure
Abbiamo
changed.
usato il rilievo fatto precedentemente, prima del terremoto, che è servito per fare il progetto.
The survey
Il progetto
before
è
the
stato
earthquake
appaltato, successivamente
was the one
con il
used,
terremoto
and
le situazioni
we started
strutturali
working,
sono fortemente cambiate. La
but
torre,
afterwards
per
the
esempio, è
structural
uscita
aspects
di 15
changed. For instance, the
centimetri
tower
rispetto alla posizione
was no
precedente.
longer a 15,
In questo modo
it
abbiamo
was
potuto
exceeding 15
realizzare
centimeters
una
in
sorta
regards
di
to the
curve di
original
livello sopra le
structure.
facciate
And we
per
can see
confrontare
some
gli elementi che
curves,
sono
level
variati,
curves on
le
the
curvature
facades
sono
in order
variate,
to
e in questo caso
compare all the
abbiamo
different
colpito i progettisti
variating elements. We see
che le
the curves, the
dimensioni al
walls,
millimetro, a 2 millimetri diciamo, perché appunto
and the signers were given
degli
with
spostamenti che
2
si sono
millimeter
effettuati, che
dimensions.
sono verificati tra lo stato prima del sisma e quello successivo al sisma. Questa è una diagnosi.
So we see the situation before and after the earthquake.
Di semplice
This is a
ricaduta,
diagnosis
analizzando
of
che sono stati
a
prodotti
very
da,
simple
laser scanner, da rilievo laser scanner. Ovviamente
work
il rilievo
analyzing
laser
the
scanner non è
data
una magia,
produced by a
ha necessità di presupposti.
laser
In questo
scanner.
caso, quando si vogliono
It is a
monitorare e
setback.
confrontare due rilievi, ovviamente dobbiamo avere dei capisaldi comuni, eccetera. Insomma,
And it is
tutte
used when
delle cose
you
che tutti noi
are to
sappiamo.
monitor two different
L'ultimo
surveys.
esempio che vi
For
porto è
that
un
case,
lavoro
you
che
need
adesso
to do
di ricaduta
calculations.
che abbiamo fatto qui a Città
This
del
is
Messico,
also a setback
mentre,
work that we did here in Mexico
elaboravamo
City
invece gli altri rilievi di San Guglielmo.
while we were
Volevo proprio
doing the San
sperimentare,
Guillermo
perché
surveys.
Passeggiando
It was an
per
experimental
il centro, ci rendeva conto
process.
di come
We were
gli
walking
interventi,
around downtown and we
sono
noticed
stati,
that
all'interno degli
interventions
isolati, tanti interventi
in
di sostituzione venivano
neighborhoods
effettuati senza tener conto della sinergia
and
che si
related
instaurava
works
o
were done
si veniva
without
a
taking into account
interrompere tra i
synergies.
fabbricati contigui. Quindi ci è venuta l'idea di provare a fare
And
un
then
rilievo
houses
delle facciate,
and
dei
factories
fronti di un
were
isolato urbano.
interrupted.
Abbiamo parlato con l'ufficio del centro storico.
So
abbiamo
we
trovato
did a survey
la
on the
stella
front
e quindi
parts
ci
of the
siamo
structure. This
dedicati
is
a
a historic
rilevare
downtown,
queste superfici.
and we
Qui si vede
were
anche
granted authorization.
un piccolo video
So we did
delle
a survey on
singole
the
scansioni,
surface,
questo per capire
and it is
la
a short
tridimensionalità
video
della
on
nuvola dei punti, e poi abbiamo utilizzato anche
where you're
qui
able
la
to see
funzione
each
dell'elevation
part
map, si chiama, cioè
and
andare
the
ad
visual
analizzare i
mapping
dislivelli
function.
rispetto a superfici
In here we can
predeterminate.
analyze all
Qui
different
vedete
levels,
il gradiente viene rappresentato con i diversi colori e poi possono diventare curve di livello.
and you see the
Abbiamo
different
delle
levels
informazioni
representing
interessantissime
the
sulla,
level curves,
acclinità
as well as
delle
important
superfici, sul fuoripiombo,
changes in the
il
shape.
comportamento di queste superfici, e diventano
These
curve,
are some
inizialmente
distortions.
nascono come piani, ma diventano curve.
these surfaces used to be flat and then they became curved. So we noticed their behavior. Other interesting data is the one that we noticed in the streets. The streets would leave trail of that movement, and so buildings adapted to the earthquake movements. They became curved, and we wanted to have sheets of these buildings in order to assess the risk coefficient, for us to know if buildings are next to others. In this case, they were no longer next to them. And this gave us room to consider certain areas of the neighborhood instead of doing the work building by building. Could we move on to San Guillermo Monastery? These are the final products. We also conducted a survey on the downtown office. It was the only place where we were able to have access. And losing the wall verticality, this was 30 to 40 centimeters from the basis and the upper part. I will now give the floor to Matteo. He did a survey together with us, but we'll hear why it is about, not just about the point clouds, but it is about the intelligence by which an architect is able to work with the point cloud and what he or she can obtain from that gathered data. In March 2018, as we just said, we worked with the INA to conduct a survey on the monastery, which is a UNESCO heritage. It's part of the World Heritage of the UNESCO, and this is a before and after. This is a work methodology. From an architectural survey with a group of experts. Well, the first step was, in 2018, we did a laser survey and we recreated the whole model. We also had some photographs. That was another survey. And we recreated the three-dimensionality of the object. We are able to obtain an accurate morphology of the architectural object from the scanner, and the 3D allows us to reconstruct textures, and we are able to do a diagnosis mapping of the surface. These are some of the first works that led us to plan creation. The laser scanner is a massive acquisition model. Basically, you place it where it is able to have a 360 degrees vision. And by surrounding the building, we were able to reconstruct the convent's width, which is also part of the UNESCO's heritage. So we had its perimeter, and the point cloud definition is very specific. As you're able to see, we notice every architectural element. This is the architecture's state when the survey happened. We were unable to see the surface, but we were able to obtain every decoration's characteristics from the facade. These are 2D extractions from the point cloud, and through them we can understand the set. And these are some aerial pictures of these. These are aerial views from the laser scanner. So we have several data and views. When using this laser scanning, in Italy, each extraction has its specificities that we can see through the instruments. Now, going to neighborhoods and making use of different scanners, well, the issue is we may get false data for which we need to have several sections of the model represented so that the surface is correct. This is the global survey, and we noticed an error. We were on below 1 centimeter. These are point cloud views, parametric views. These sections allow us to see the whole structure. From these we obtained data. We have the plans. These are the blueprints. You can notice how the surface was distorted. These are the facades, all of the prospects. The photographic works were done in October 2018, once we had already started working, but there's still a part that needs to be restored. Aside from these interventions, even though we didn't do it, we are able to read the stratigraphy. It's the only analysis that we didn't do, but it's still missing in archaeological analysis. The whole structure enables us to see and have an interpretation through a stratigraphic reading that's more. We would have been able to have greater information related to closed windows, windows that were closed or not noticeable due to bricks, and this information we could have gathered from stratigraphy. This is a reading on the building's evolution, and as we've said, these were done back in the 1500s, but they were modified. So for us to move forward, we need to show everything that has happened with the building. We're about to finish. The structure and typology of these monasteries was very interesting, since we noticed that they are very similar to the ones that we heard of yesterday. This structure that was done in parallel galleries it is not a common practice. European architects, and specifically architects that went to the Holy Land, for instance, the Francis. This is a very interesting connection of Grey Friars, and this is exactly what happens. The technology is the same, and they were able to notice that pointed arches worked well, for instance, for earthquakes that took place in Israel and in Palestine. So during medieval times, it was under earthquakes. This is a structural, typological work. And these allows us to attest the building wisdom that architects held at that time. So just to conclude on what was done on the inside of, and as part of this project, we did diagnosis, we identified degradation, we identified each room. Even masonry was extracted for analysis and analytical purposes. The stone research on masonry is very important for us to know about its making and about the materials that will be used for the intervention, such as mortar. We also used thermal cameras to be able to know about the material, about its cohesion. Obviously, this type of research gives us information on humidity and its absorption. There may be a material lack of cohesion, and inside the walls we may even extract data on artificial inflation and about biological activity from moss. We have experimented on that part, but we could do it on other surfaces. We also filled sheets to explain the building situation, and here we see the typical collapse methods of each structure. We presented all the dimensions that are on the lower level and on the upper level. All this data was included on a sheet. This is a preliminary analysis. Of course, it is not the definitive one. So we made dangers clear. We showed the main walls. And as Reynaldo is saying, we were able to have a learning activity. It was a didactic activity, and many interns and students were interested to be part of it. And we had 3 PhD students who completed these studies. So thank you. I'm happy to have finished earlier, so if we have enough time, then maybe we can move on to the Q&A, since... Or we can also go out earlier and head for lunch, which is also good news. So thank
Sin
you.
duda es de destacarse el compromiso y la solidaridad que mostró la sinergia entre la Universidad.
We can highlight the collaboration between the University of Firenze. So thank you. Now let's see if there are any questions.
Não sei se me vão entender, mas queria perguntar, quando fazem a leitura de um edifício,
I wanted to ask
diferenças de temperatura, a presença da água, não poderão afetar a leitura das deformações do mesmo. O edifício tem temperaturas diferentes. Não sei até que ponto é que não afeta, pergunto.
Mi sembra che
apologies from the interpreting booth.
quando voi fate un rilievo di questi palazzi, se forse anche l'umidità e l'acqua possono possibilmente affettare il rilievo, mi sa.
Allora, sì e no. Cosa vuol dire?
Yes
Sì,
and
perché
no.
intanto se piove non si
Why
può fare,
yes?
prima cosa, ovviamente.
Well, if it rains, we're not able to conduct a survey.
Il valore
However, if humidity changes the intensity value,
allo strumento, però questo non modifica la posizione morfologica dell'oggetto nello spazio.
meaning that radius would go back to the instrument,
Su una superficie
this has no impact on the object's position in space.
ma è completamente bagnato.
Now, if we have to do a survey on an entirely wet floor, we are not able to conduct a survey since the laser would reflect itself. It would need to be but it would only happen if it were with a water mirror. If I understood correctly, we saw some humidity in infrared use. Infrared surveys gives us a heat gradient
che emette una determinata superficie. Il gradiente è riferito alla superficie.
This gradient refers to the surface.
L'umidità può cambiare,
And since humidity may give you changes in the gradient, humidity is within. So we receive information on the consistency.
della parte interiore della muratura.
We receive information on the consistency or the lack of it on the inside of the wall. In such a way, we're able to know where are some holes or empty parts, and also we are able to notice flora that may be on top of the surface.
Muchas gracias.
Well, thank you.
Los mecanismos para compartir toda la documentación de los casos. Y por favor, un fuerte aplauso.
We'd like to give a big applause to our speakers.
Bueno, a continuación vamos a tener una
We'll now have a conference on analysis, structural analysis and documentation, experiences shared between Hungary and Mexico. Experts from Hungary will share their experiences from Syria and abroad, and we're pleased to share this experience, just as the other ones, since it represents the conclusion of 2 work years from ongoing visits. These experts for these 2.5 days have been focused on studying and preserving Mexican heritage. And therefore, these collaborations, we are sure that they're a milestone in Mexico and in our country. We see collaboration between all the different institutions. With us are Scholt Vasaros, coming from the University of Economics and Technology in Budapest, Hungary. He's a scholar from the architecture division of that university, and since 2000 he has his own workshop. He works on designs and innovative projects for museums around natural and architectural aspects. He has this group of 20 experts, and they have implemented projects in architecture, interior design, protection and preservation of monuments, and exhibits. He has been awarded abroad, and he is co-author of several scientific works. He's mainly focused on the relationship between archaeology and architecture, and he's working on research in areas of conflict and crisis, mainly Egypt, Syria, and Mexico. This project includes technological transference under risk contexts. As an architect professor, he has focused himself in crisis situations and political situations after disasters. Engineer Oliver Koch graduated as a master in civil engineer, economist, and a legal economist. He is a structural designer, an expert, and he has been part of several construction projects as the main expert, and he also has his own structural company. As a designer, he specializes in reinforcing heritage, the use of carbon fiber, and using brute saver technology.
We're happy for this conference.
Thank you. Buenas tardes. Welcome, everybody. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And you cannot imagine how many common roots we have. Our countries are very far, but for example, you know this building, you have to know, the Palace of Fine Arts, and for example, the main cupola of this palace was designed by a Hungarian architect. He was Géza Marotti. Our Italian colleagues should know that Géza Marotti was the architect of the Hungarian pavilion on the Venice Biennale, and he is our proud, and that is just one of our common values. I am an architect. I have an own studio where we have a lot of different kind of works, especially a lot of them among the museology. We are designing a lot of exhibitions, museum extensions, and we are doing a lot with archaeology. But I am a teacher too at the Technical University in Budapest, and I believe really on the practice-based teaching and the research-based teaching, and that's why I established about 10 years ago a very special studio for our students that called Educatio Extramuros, something to do outside the walls of the school. And these projects are surprisingly very successful. We are going usually with our students to architecturally interesting places. We are touching a lot of times the cultural landscapes, and we are looking for really interesting sites. We try to disseminate the results, and we try to work within international field network. Why we are doing this? Because I have this personal interest on this topic. I have already more than 20 years field experience, especially in the Middle East. I saw a lot of things, also very bad things and very sad things. You cannot imagine how many different wars, civil wars, and damaged heritage we saw and tried to rescue. And a few years ago, we started with a special course on crisis architecture for our students, and we involved all of our field work under this umbrella. Those are our side projects. I would like to speak today about the reddish projects too, from Syria and from Egypt, and of course I would like to summarize our future project in Mexico. Those are the red dots where we worked in the last past 10 years, and the yellows are our current very active project, except Mexico, of course. Why is Syria important for us? Because last year we had a 800-year celebration of the first Hungarian crusade. It was guided by Andrew II, the Hungarian king, in the beginning of the 13th century, and he visited two large-scale forts at that time, Margat and Crac de Chevalier, and he was unsuccessful on the war and on the taking back Jerusalem, but he donated a lot of money, a lot of silver to reinforce the castles, and that's why those are our belongings. Since 2006, we have an ongoing project in Margat, that is on the coastal zone, and we asked the Syrian government in 2015. That was the darkest year in the Syrian war. Just they had, I mean, the government had just the coastal zone, everything except Damascus and some little parts of Aleppo was occupied by the radical Islamic forces. And we asked the Syrian government, and they answered, okay, if you are brave enough, you could come to Syria during the war. We cannot protect you, but if the monuments are important to you, we try to support you, and please come to help us. And since 2015, let's say since 2011, since the beginning of the war, we are the only mission who is working in Syria, and that is one of our proud. Of course, it is a very dangerous game, but we hope that we were able to rescue something for the future. It is even not easy to go to Syria currently via Istanbul, Beirut, or via Athens and Beirut. You can arrive in Lebanon and you can rent a car and almost officially you can enter Syria. That project wasn't safe, of course, but all of the members are still alive, and most of them are girls because our boys are not brave enough to come to Syria. But that was really amazing how many girls and young students are applied to come to this very dangerous country. And of course, I can show you a lot of pictures like this. It is a very sad story what happened in Syria, but I would like to concentrate yet on our two project sites. One is Margat on the coast, and the other one is the very famous World Heritage Site Crac de Chevalier, which was partly built in the 13th century by the donation of our great king. What happened in Crac de Chevalier, that was unfortunately attacked by the governmental forces because some rebels took the castle in 2014, and but the battle wasn't so heavy. What we discovered in the castle, most of the damages, or the bigger damages, are done by the rebels. They used landmines and they used very strange explosive materials, and that's why the important parts of the castle are lost. The government, or not the government, the Syrian INA, let's say, the Directorate General of Antiquities and Museums, invited us to visit the castle. That's the current state. What you can do, how can we help? And that time, for the first season, we prepared a kind of damage map. It was 2016, February and March. We went 2 times to Syria in that time, because the government was afraid that the rebels coming back, and at that time the situation wasn't clear. Nowadays it is also not clear, but we were really in hurry. Let's do as much as possible. We didn't use any specific tools, just some plans of previous publications that was made by an architect from Luxembourg, John Zimmer, and we used his facades, his ground plans to mark all of the damages. And but in the next year, we confronted that the problem is much bigger than it was expected. At that time, we discovered that, for example, this the so-called great staircase in the inner forecourt wasn't shooted by any kind of guns. That was just exploded using landmines. But we contributed the work. We documented the missing elements. We collated a kind of damage map. I have to mention that no one financed this project, just our state and just our universities and just some private companies. We asked UNESCO several times, but UNESCO wasn't able to support any project in a country during the war. Nowadays, since this year, we have a little support from the UNESCO to finish this damage report. And in the next seasons, I mean in the summer season 2016, we started to collect the exploded pieces. I mean the Gothic carvings. If you want to see a really very early masterpiece Gothic, then you have to visit Crac de Chevalier. It is the same period like the Notre Dame in Paris. Perhaps the same masters came to the Holy Land to do their best, and really all of the details are super fine, and it's really a pity that has really heavy damages. And but that was the last season, 2016 summer. When we used just our old-fashioned fashion tools like pencils and papers and maybe some geodesic tools and measuring tapes and laser dystometer and nothing else, but we expected that we can never finish this work if we are not able to do something. Of course, we have in Hungary laser scanners. At that time, we had 3 or 4 different types at the university, but we couldn't find any insurance company and for the laser scanners. And that was the period when we searched for new methods. And you mentioned the structure from motion, and we find this Russian software on the internet, and we tried to use it. In the beginning, we contacted the headquarters in St. Petersburg. We had a lot of questions to the company, and also we developed together something within the software, and we started to use it in large scale. We bought some new cameras, as you see, but of course we needed the old-fashioned tools, and we used, as I mentioned there, the Agisoft. Nowadays it's called Metaship professional software, and. Of course, the method is very easy. The result is almost the same, like in the case of using laser scanner, but you don't need a laser scanner. I like very much laser scanning, but during a war, under the protection of the Russian Air Force, it is not possible to use it, and it's very easy. You have to, of course, to care about a good camera. You have to care about the workflow, how to take the photographs, how is the accuracy, how is the whole workflow. But based on the photographs, as you can see on this image, you can have, of course, a point cloud, a mesh, texturized point cloud, and a very accurate model. And in the beginning, we had very bad results. We don't had any good models, and every models were broken somewhere, and they were not so accurate. But nowadays, the method is going well, and we are under 2-3 centimeter accuracy, so better it is not possible. Really, this is the maximum, I guess, with the Agisoft in building scale, of course, not in object scale. Of course, we are using just very simple laser dystometers to measure the so-called markers. Markers are supporting the software's workflow, and sometimes we had not always. Sometimes we had some total stations for a bigger bigger investments, and a typical evening, a typical night in Syria when we had electricity, of course, that is only 2 times per day, 2 times 3 hours, and one has to use this great occasion. And every day we tested our models in a low accuracy. If it's working, then it's good, we can go home. It's not, we have to repeat it next day. The main aim to use the Agisoft and the photoscan to be quick, smart, and accurate, because these kind of projects are not really holiday projects. Those are not academic research projects. The time is very limited. The abilities and everything is really very limited, even the electricity, and that's why we have to collect a very accurate data. The data, I mean the 3D model, the accurate 3D model, and we can elaborate the plans, the analysis at home, at our offices. And for example, a good result about the damaged cloister, and of course, if we have a good model, we can cut it anywhere. We can have good sections. And we confronted with some problems, what to do with the uppermost parts of the castle, how to take photos. Of course, for that we used drones. That's the model of that part, and that is on the left the traditional method, cleaning the walls. On the right, our method. Those are our students, because if we don't cut the vegetation, the model cannot be accurate. It is a quite dangerous thing, and in the Middle East, but we survived it too. And another case, the chapel, which was for sure built from medieval Hungarian silver, that was very important for us. And the roof of the chapel had a very, as you can see here, it was bombed by government or something, and during recapturing the castle. And for that one, we used our drones to have a very accurate plan about the roof. That one is not our drone. That is a helicopter of the Russian artillery. We were under the protection of the Russian Air Force. That was a very funny thing, because I learned Russian for 10 years. It was compulsory in the 80s in Hungary when I was young, let's say, and I never imagined before that it can be useful, especially in Syria, especially during a civil war. But it was a lucky situation. And that is our drone fleet. We had 4 drones, 2 are gone, 2 are still in use. And finally, we isolated from a great donation of our ministry the roof of the chapel. And what to do with the models? Of course, it's very good if we have models for a show or for rotating or for showing for the audience. But finally, the main aim to have accurate plans. But but the post-processing, as you know for sure, dear Italian colleagues, it takes time. It is, if we have 1 week on the site for survey, we have more than half year work at home, at our laboratories. But finally, now we have the most precise sections and most precise plans, stone by stone plans about the chapel. It was never done before. And that is what can we offer during for example, during our Syrian survey. And of course, we also had some proposals for the new furnitures of the chapel. Those are not photos; those are the photorealistic models. And that was a pity situation. That was end of August of 2017. That drone survey. And the Syrian colleagues asked, okay, let's help us to send some stone plans. We have to repair 1 corner of the chapel. And I promised, okay, we are going back to Hungary end of August. We can send the plans in 2 months, end of October. And just in case, I have made some sketches on the site. No one know, and we copied it for the Syrian colleagues. And 3 weeks after 3 weeks after, when we didn't start it with the post-processing of the thing, I have got this picture. They cutted the stones based on my sketches, and I am an old school architect. I grooved up without using any softwares, and we have got these pictures in the end of September, and the consolidation of the chapel's corner was realized in the beginning of October, when we even didn't start it with the post-processing of the models, but we have it, of course. That is just very shortly. That is our other dominium, let's say, the Kalat markup, the Margat Castle, which was also built partly from medieval Hungarian money. But it wasn't damaged during the war. It is a long-term scientific research where we invested a lot of works, and now and you can see the happy team. Everyone should take photographs everywhere, because every taken photograph is part of the history. That is our motto, especially in the Middle East, but also in crisis zones, let's say like Mexico, because of the earthquakes. And that's the annual team. Every year are going 20-25 Hungarian students, architects to Syria, and we have, of course, almost the same number of Syrian colleagues, and that's it. And but one of the most important result, what I would like to highlight, the last sentence, that nowadays around 100 Syrian students, architects we have in Hungary. The government sponsored a very unique scholarship, the so-called Stipendium Hungaricum, and among 15,000 foreigner students, also Mexicans, are studying in Hungary. But we are I think that this is the best help for that country. Just very briefly, our Egyptian project, where the mission started in the early 80s, when I was 10 years old or something like that. But 10 years after, or 15 years after, in the mid of 90s, I joined the mission. It's a very unique, very nice place, very close to the Hatshepsut temple, which is well known, I guess, for most of the architects. The white 3D model is our excavation site. That is an all-day picture about the excavation, and we confronted a few years ago that let's finish the traditional survey methods, because we cannot finish it ever, and let's start to use the Agisoft. Let's start to use our Syrian experiences. And it is not allowed to use drones in Egypt. I don't know why. Drones and GPS are forbidden, and that's why we try to survey large-scale, flat or hilly sites like this one, like this. And I was not optimistic with the result, but finally it is working, and one don't need drones anymore, and we can also skip it from our luggage, and the models were very accurate. That is a model. This is not a stone accurate model. This is not photo anymore, and it's easy to generate, of course, top views, or easy to generate sections or plans, or it is also easy to evaluate real drawings, real plans based on the 3D models, and also details. And based on the details, we can document the tombs, the architectural features. And one more thing: if we add together all of the external and internal model, we can open a new world, because we have a lot of underground spaces, underground areas, which are not understandable even for us. Just after doing this kind of survey, this kind of measure. And it can be turned very easily to scientific accuracy and to publications. And one more example from Egypt that was just our special interest. It is in the desert, not far from Luxor West Bank. The interesting is this one. This building having this big amount of cupolas. No one is similar. And we decided, okay, let's test our equipment. And I asked 4 students. I gave them 5 hours. Okay, let's do the survey. And they made a ground plan. They made 400 photos. It was also limited, no more than 400 photos. I don't know why. I just asked I just try to limit the workforces, and the result is beautiful, and we were able to generate all of the sections. You can see this very funny shape of the vaulted structures, and it was very accurate. Even we can see the secondary used stones in the walls, and we were able to generate a very accurate ground plan. And sorry, one more short example from Egypt. We started to document the life work of a very famous Egyptian architect, a Spanish colleague you mentioned yesterday, the mud brick masonry from ancient Egypt, and Hassan Fathi was really the father of the vernacular, modernized vernacular architecture, and he was the pioneer of the community-based design. And while we are working every year in Luxor for weeks or for months, we confronted that his most famous life works like New Gurna or Fares or Edfu are heavily damaged, and we started to survey all of his buildings, not with traditional methods, of course, just using photoscan and just doing some sketches. Why? Because that is really a fragile heritage, not for the eternity. And what we discovered, no one done this kind of survey before. There are thousands of books and articles about Hassan Fathi's architecture, but everyone is using the same photos, the same ground plans, which are usually wrong. And that's why we started with the survey. That is just an image how it was in the end of the 40s, and the same village nowadays. The so-called informal architecture has eaten the vernacularity, and there were just little cores which surveyed that is a case of New Gurna, which surveyed the decades, and we started to survey the remained buildings, but there are problems. Some of them are damaged, some of them having habitation, of course, and there are also damages day by day. But the Agisoft was very good because we photographed the whole rubbish dump, including the people, the sheep, and everything. And based on the 3D model, we were able to create the 2D drawings. Beside, of course, a lot of sketches, which was done by the students. And this method is, of course, very good to document the very irregular shaped or symmetrically constructed, but nowadays irregular shaped cupolas and fractures. And this experience is very well. It can be used really now in Mexico. And just very briefly before I give the word to my colleague, to Oliver. Just a short chronology, what happened between Mexico and Hungary during the last 2 years. In September, 2 years ago, you had the terrible earthquake. In October, just 1 month after, our ministry gave us a call. Okay, what can we do? Who is able to help us? In November, exactly 2 years ago, I was the first time here, and we had the first field visit with Hungarian experts. And the next year, the whole next year, we prepared the project. And finally, this year, January, we had further discussions. And this year, April, there was a ministerial agreement about 7.1 million USD, which is a donation from Hungary for the earthquake. And this year, July, we visited again the damaged sites. We visited altogether 22 sites, and we have chosen 7 projects. And end of August, I've been here again with 7 students and young architects to test our workforces. Every day, one church. That was the motto: how to test our knowledge and our workforces. And I would like to really just show very briefly. Those are the seven churches, and those are in 3 different states, and 2 are in Mexico City. The first one is Tepoztlán, a part of the World Heritage, where we would like to do we would like to be part of also of the reconstructional works. And just some images, if you don't, some of you don't visited the site. That's the site plan. Our main project is to reconstruct the Capilla Abierta. The second one to renovate the perimeter wall and to reconstruct two Capillas Posas, to reconstruct the outer facade of the monastery and to refurbish the current museum. And that's the current state of the Capilla Abierta. We had only one day in August to make all these things. We had also one day in Tepoztlan. We surveyed all of the things, the 8 people. That is a quite big number. That's the ground plan that's the current state of the Capilla Abierta. That's the reconstruction proposal. We are very lucky because significant fragments are still in situ. All the corners are there. And also we checked the stone depot behind and before the cloister, and now we have a proposal. How is it currently? How it can be? Of course, there are a lot of moral questions, ethical questions. What can we reconstruct? Which is fit for UNESCO regulations? But let's talk about it later on. That is not the current question. But this ruin is really in the mid-axe of the whole complex, and it's really a pity this condition. And but this is, of course, this is not the reconstruction plan. This is an image how it was for sure. And those are the capillas at the 3 corners. One of them is almost intact. It has to be restored and consolidated. But the 2 others are heavily damaged. Not 2 years ago. I don't know in after which earthquake. We have some archive photos from the 30s, and the condition is the same. But of course we should have this question what to do with the previous damages, and now we have the reconstructional proposals. All are different. Seems to be similar, but most of them are different, and that is just an image about the current exhibition, which will be refurbished. And the second one is the Sagrada Corazón de Jesus in Mexico City, which has some Hungarian relation. The vitrice shows Hungarian saints and kings, and that is another relation to Mexico, and that is also part of the project. It wasn't damaged during the last earthquake, but before it had some damages, and now we are also thinking about a possible reconstruction of the original interior. That is the current interior. That is the original photo made by Guillermo Monastry, of course. And those are some proposals. It is not yet decided. The research should be done. And of course we have used the drone here also, and I would like just mention a kind of accuracy. This is the existing drawing, and behind the drawing there is the model. And Tlaquiltenango, there just really shortly, we just want to offer some architectural surveys, and after the reconstruction of the whole building, and the kind of analysis of the frescoes. In Huayotzingo, the same. Huayotzingo wasn't damaged heavily during the earthquake, and that's why is it interesting for us. Why is it in this state? Maybe its western part has more walls. The inner court is smaller than in other cases. It has, of course, a lot of arguments, but this beautiful stellar vault is almost intact, and it can be really important from an engineering point of view what happened or what not happened here. And Malinalco, Divino Salvador, there is also a proposal for a complete survey of the church, and there is another one, and this is one of our case studies from the summer. It is a small, relatively small temple in Malinalco, and And we have got quite good survey documentation from INAH, but we reproduced the whole procedure using our methods. As you can see, 8 persons. I was the project manager who didn't work, but the other people worked heavily. The cameras, the drones, everything. But the most important thing that we had, our colleagues had only 4 hours. I limited the time, 4 hours, because one day, one church, that was the motto, and that was the 3rd day. And within 4 hours, we have done this amount of pictures, almost 1,500 aerial photographs, almost 1,700 interior photos, and of course some sketches for survey sketches to calibrate the models, and of course at home that's an image about the exterior of the church, and those are the 3 models. We created 3 models, one interior, one exterior, and a separate one about the staircase. And also we calculated the time which was used in our office for the post-processing, because it is also important. And you can see here the things, the dense point cloud calculation, 5 hours. It is not so strange. And everything all together, the 3 models, and melting the full 3D model together, it was 5 days, 5 working days. And I think it's a good result if we have 4 hours on the site and 1 week, let's say, as a post-processing period, and we have a very accurate 3 centimeter accurate documentation of a whole church, and those are the accuracy of the church. And of course, we compared here also the model with the given documentation. There are just smaller, let's say, not mistakes, just inaccuracies. But that's why. But an accurate survey about a slightly or heavily deformed church cannot be done. Used traditional methods, and that's why that's the offer from us to use our capacities and to use this knowledge. And really the last thing, the Basilica de Loreto in Mexico City, which has this very strange deformation. And our aim was just to explore what can be done. It was our last day just before our departure, and just some images about the current situation, and we found some ground plans and a facade plan in some publications, and we had only 2 hours and before the departure. And most of the batteries were out, but there was a successful drone flight, and also in the interior we used for the survey of the cupola or drones. And finally we had a very inaccurate, let's say, but a base point cloud, but a very accurate ground plan based on the interior photos. And this is a part of the longitudinal section. There are just very small deformations, but if we go to the cross sections, that is really very strange. And that will be the main aim of our participation, to do it really in a good accuracy, not within 2 hours, then maybe a week or something like that, and to have really a good. That is really strange, and to have really a good documentation for further analysis, because the church is still closed, and that's the cupola. And first of all, thanks for the team in August. You can see here, they are on the top of the pyramid in Malinalco. All are young architects. Everyone was trained in Syria or in Egypt. That's why we were so smart and quick. And of course, thanks for all of the colleagues, partners in Mexico and in Hungary. Thank you for your attention.
And from the other side, I would like to talk about what can we offer from a structural engineering point of view. But first of all, I would like to tell that this is not our first helping to Mexico after earthquake, Dr. and Professor Dulacska Endre, was supporting a lot after the earthquake in 1985. We are still learning from him what he was learning here in the renovation or during the renovation. What we can offer after visiting the sites and looking everything what is happening there. From structural point of view, we can make global 3D models, microstructural models, periodical technical supervision, and we can also offer laboratory testing capacities. Just one example for each. For example, for 3D modeling, of course, we can learn how is the behavior of the structure, as we learned from the professors today and yesterday already. But it rises up a lot of question about because of the inhomogeneity of the materials and the structure, and also the inhomogeneity of the soil. So it takes a lot of time to make a bit more accurate structural model, where we can find out where are the weakest point and where we should make reinforcing on the structures. Very good question. Yesterday raised up already that how can we handle the materials, isotropic, orthotropic, or absolutely anisotropic. For example, here you can see a very big clay brick inside the wall, and I think these weak pieces cannot be handled in global models at all. This is what I have already mentioned, that from the global structural model calculations and analysis, we can find out the weaker point or the weakest point of the structures, and maybe think about the methods of the reinforcing as well. Also, we can use the 3D structural models for analysis other opportunities. For example, this one, what we have found out to use some kind of drainage system and dumping system together next to the building. It has two advantages. One, it will somehow slow down the waves a bit coming to the structure, but also keep the soil and the foundation dry, which is also a very good effect to the structure. We can complement the structural analysis of the superstructure by, for example, Plexis 3D modeling of the soil, and we can analyze these two things together as one system. For micromodeling, I would use to check and invest the behavior of the structure after strengthening, for example, with brood saver spirals or carbon strips and carbon foils as well. And after these small analyses, we can build back to the superstructure, the global model, these parameters, and we can check again the behavior of the global structures. One thing what we have seen on site and why we would like to offer our technical supervision on site. If you see, this is the original built wall structure, where I think they have built layer by layer. It means one layer mortar and put in a lot of stones inside, and again one layer flowing mortar and put again inside new bricks. This is a bit similar to the statical model what we are using for structural modeling, but right now we can see on site the building that they build piece by piece each stone and put independently the mortar onto the stone and of course as bedding, but now you can see small gaps, cracks already in the new wall, and that would be really a useful improvement if we could go back to the theoretical assumptions to use more accurate construction methods. This is another question, why I think that structural engineers and designers should go to check the sites. This is a very good sample from Malinaco. We could see on these buttresses that they are just damaged on a very little way. You can see just one small piece going out and one small crack you can see here, but during the earthquake that was working with this radius for moment radius for pressure when it was bended, but right now at the next earthquake the moment radius will be deducted until this one. It means this is around 5–10% loss of the structure strength. And this is my last one before lunch. What we also can offer is some laboratory testing capacities. Why I think this is necessary, you can see here a wall what was built up, of course, until the top, but remained only this part, and this one is the new part of the wall. On the older part below, you cannot see any cracks here, but on the new part of the wall, you can see already after building some weeks, you can see already a lot of shrinkage cracks inside. And if you imagine that you can find these cracks inside the wall as well, this will also lead us to a much weaker structure. This is what I know and my ideas, and I'm waiting for your ideas as well, of course. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Por favor, un aplauso para los especialistas de Hungría.
A round of applause to our experts.
Looking forward for the next
Phase of the project. Y bueno, ahora para finalizar, bueno, les agradecemos a ellos dos. Van a estar la oficial de programa de los instrumentos
de política exterior de la Unión Europea.
Finally, we will have the participation from the representative of the European Union in charge of architectural interventions.
We are going to make the questions in the round phases. Okay. Thank you very much. Por favor, vamos a pasar para la clausura breve de esta temporada.
We will now proceed to the closing ceremony And in order to do this, we will have the participation of Paola Bellagón, Valeria Valero-Pie, National Coordinator of Historical Heritage Sites, as well as María del Carmen Castro Barrera.
Buenas tardes a todos. Sé que todos tienen mucha hambre, entonces haré súper rápida.
Good afternoon. I know that we're all very hungry, so I'll try to be very quick. Being with you, surrounded by so much passion and knowledge, is very fruitful. We have tried to open up a space so that you are able to exchange knowledge, ideas, and expertise for the future. This momentum should not stop with today's closing. The discussion should remain. We should keep on having conversations, and that would be the European Union wish, so to give a follow-up to this momentum. So I'd like to know what will happen after these days. We would like to know if this event was useful, what did we achieve, and what are our future goals, which is why I ask of you to remain in touch, to share with us your experience, so that we're also able to provide follow-up to this symposium. I'd like to thank you and thank all the institutions that were able to be here and those that aren't present. And allow me to remember that we have colleagues and people that have supported us behind the scenes. So thank you for the support on this ongoing time, on this month. And I'd also like to thank the attendants and the interpreters. We'll also be very short, as Paola has mentioned. I'd like to thank the European Union, and regarding movable assets, we selected, as I mentioned in the opening ceremony, those movable assets that in cream restorers would be able to work with. Our degree includes, it is very broad, but some materials are left aside, such as mosaic, stained glasses, organs. In the case of organs, we have created a team, and as part of the coordination, it's been fruitful for the supervision and registry. However, we still need to create some specialty studies. In some other assets, we have developed criteria with the intervention of cultures. In the case of murals related to assets, well, there are pending issues. We should have some information regarding the assets destruction in its degree. We also work with easels, and we care about an accurate reconstruction and refurbishment. If after another type of an event or an earthquake there are more damages, then the asset will be damaged on the inside as well. Regarding bells and organs, we also saw the importance not only of a social but also sound function of it. We need to bear it in mind constantly. And as I said since the opening ceremony, the risk control program is fundamental to us. I'd like to thank Maria Elena Corrado for the information given to us, since we are willing to establish it in a more formal manner. So in general terms, that was my message. Thank you.
pues sí, es difícil ahora en 2 minutos tratar de clausurar un evento.
Trying to close such a symposium in 2 minutes is really tough. This was a rich event, and we have now concluded these discussions. As Paula said, it entailed months behind this International Symposium, but it fulfilled our expectations. These were all high-level conferences where different viewpoints and experiences were shared, which makes this even richer. It is fruitful to us, and that is our main aim when doing these goals. We like to share different ideas, theories, and also review certain practical examples for us to understand what are some examples, not to be followed step by step, but which would be applicable in our countries. We were able to hear speakers coming from 6 different countries, 5 Europeans, one from Mexico, and several fields were explained here. We had architecture, anthropology, engineers, structural design experts, stained glass, Mr. Leonardo, and so many more field experts, which was what provided us with this fruitful discussion. We have very little time, so it is very tough to have some or drafts and conclusions, which we will share afterwards, as well as subjects to be followed later today and tomorrow. My note-taking was very extensive, but I won't be reading each item since we are just about to go to lunch. And once again, we can attest the need of working with interdisciplinary teams. Every project needs to be discussed and reviewed by restorers, architects, movable assets restorers, as well as by different experts and fields of study. By this, we are able to have an even greater knowledge for a better decision making. These conferences left us with the need of having cultural records for an administrative and technical control, but also for us to get to know in detail what was the state that structures held before earthquakes took place. In almost all conferences, each asset was said to have its own characteristics or specificities. Therefore, intervention also needs to be tailor-made for that specific asset according to its own characteristics. For that reason, the cultural knowledge is fundamental, which we can obtain from documentary sources and also from architectural surveys, as we heard from the examples. We can have more accuracy, and it's not only through the best technology, but it can also be different techniques of conducting surveys. And relating this to historic sources, we will be giving with more information so that our interventions are better suited. As I said, my notes, this is only the beginning of them, but only to conclude, I'd like to share some thanking messages that I believe are fundamental. I'd first like to thank every speaker, both European and Mexicans, who were throughout these 2 days working with us and sharing knowledge and expertise. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank the whole European Union team, the European Union delegation. I'd like to thank Paola, specifically from the first symposium. Paola was a pillar in making this happen, but I'd like for you to share these the most sincere gratitude to your team. Cristina Gonzalez, the INA teams, the National Preservation teams headed by Mari Carmen, Thalia, Daniela, Maria Richter, as well as the different Marias, and all of the staff and the registry. The Minister of Culture, she was not able to be here today, but she was following from up close this event. I'd like to also thank the National Historic Monuments Preservation Coordination, Mariana Colonel, Anita. Thank you for being part of all the different organizational stages of this event. The INCRIM, year after year, we've been part of this venue. The INA press that shares all of this information online. The symposium was live streamed, and everything that took place will now be available for further consultation. And only to conclude, well, I'd like to thank all of the attendants who were with us throughout these 2 days. Thank you, and until the next time.
Del trabajo, pero no es público general.